Good morning, it's Thursday the 10th of October 2024 and I'm back up at Hillmount Garden Centre in the Castlereagh Hills. I'm up here this morning to film the book launch that's taking place here. It's another book launch for my good friend Aidan Campbell, BAM. I've moved down to downstairs in Hillmount, and here is a selection of some of Aidan Campbell's previous volumes. There's an awful lot more, but here's just some of them. And this is the book that's going to be launched this morning. This is Cregagh Updated, and they're going fast, and you can purchase these up in Hillmount. This is Aidan's latest volume, an illustrated and spoken history of Woodstock, Cregagh and East Belfast. This spoken and illustrated history is entitled Cregagh Updated and follows on from a series of local history books, also by Aidan Campbell, which cover areas of East Belfast, South Belfast and Greater Belfast. Cregagh Updated takes the form of a journey. It starts at Crummock Square, follows the arterial route across East Bridge Street and Albert Bridge, entering Albert Bridge Road and then into the Woodstock Road and Cregagh Road and finishing at the Hillfoot Road, now known as the A55 Upper Knockbreed and Dual Carriageway, with a few interesting diversions along the way. The journey takes us through the old townlands of Ballymacarrett, Ballymacarrett and Cregagh. Aidan Campbell continues to give illustrated talks to local groups, and profits from the sale of this book and all his other volumes are donated to local charities and worthy causes, including Marie Curie Cancer Cure. And this book, like all the others that Aidan has produced, holds a wealth of information and maps, photographs, interviews. It's nearly 200 pages long, and if you want to step back in time, so to speak, this is the book to get. All our yesterdays. And you can get one of these at Hillmount for £10, and it's for what you're getting. It's really, really cheap. And if we're thinking about Christmas, this would be the ideal present. Okay, thanks very much.
Now, Judith, can you hear me at the back there? Ah, fantastic. Stuart, can you hear me at the front? You can't hear me. Well, listen harder. Well, thanks very much, everybody, for coming along. The latest local history publication, Cregagh Updated. Now, I had a conversation with somebody earlier this morning, just before you all arrived, and of course the question is it Cregagh or Cregagh? I said, well, it really all depends which part of the road you come from. And of course, the Cregagh part implies the posh end of the Cregagh Road. But we'll get to that. So, before I get to the story, I'd like to ask a couple of gentlemen to say a few words. And the first speaker is going to be Mr. Robin Newton, former Speaker of the Stormont Assembly. Robin, the floor is all yours.
I do wish you well with this publication, and thank Aidan again for the privilege and thank him for his work on behalf of the charities, and I trust the book will be as successful as previous publications have been. So thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Robin, for those kind words. Doing research for this book, and of course, one of the things I was very interested in was the history of sort of sponsorship and support over the years. So what I found out was that Michelangelo, the famous artist 100 years ago, he had the Pope. He was his sponsor. So Michelangelo had the Pope. Karl Marx, who was a man who invented communism, really, he had a gentleman called Frederick Engels. He supported Karl Marx. So Aidan Campbell has John McClelland. I did contact the Vatican, but the Pope wasn't available today. So John, maybe you'd like to say a couple of words.
But anyway, but also, of course, what does Cregagh mean to me? I didn't really know the Cregagh area. We all know George Best, if you're into the world of football. I suppose if you're into the world of rugby, the Ravenhill grounds, Jack Kyle would have played there, the famous British Lions player and so forth. So there's a lot of interesting facts come from the Cregagh area, but I don't want to bore you with what I know, which is very little. I think the best thing for me is to sit down, be quiet, and listen to the expert here, who's done fantastic work for all these charities, as Robin said, and in recognition of that, he's got all sorts of awards, the British Empire medals, isn't that right? And then the East Side awards. So Aidan is a phenomenal person. I think we should put our hands together and thank him for all the good work he's done.
Here we are. So just want to say, as a reminder, a few words of thanks, because it takes a lot of work to get to this stage of book and publication. So just want to thank Robin Newton, and of course John McClelland. And I want to thank all the contributors of the archives and things. So people have supplied photographs, and everybody's been attributed. And people have told me stories, and that's in the book as well. So I can't do this without people's cooperation and help and good wishes. Proofreaders, yes, I've got a man called Chris Woods, a member of the extended family, and he's the man who does proofreading, so he knows where the apostrophe goes, before the S or after, that sort of thing. Very important. Where's Wesley Thompson? Wesley? Yes. Grammatical pedantry, very important, Wesley. Wesley was a school teacher, that's why I'm saying that, you see. I'm very impressed at the printing again. I've given something like 600 talks over the last 19 years, so thanks very much. And donations to charity now amount to a total 190,000 from the sale of the books. So thanks very much. So getting up to the 200,000 figure. So I want to thank as well, as of course the books have to be sold. It's one thing to write them and all the rest of it. So the books are on sale here and Hamilton News. Anybody here from Hamilton News today? Yes, yes. Books still on sale there. They're going well, aren't they? Don't tell Robin Mercer. Don't tell him more Baz. The books are on sale there as well. So I want to thank today particularly Robin Mercer and staff. Michelle not there, yeah, she made the tea, very good. Photographers, yes, you'll have seen people about Adrian Ross and Raymond Anderson, yes. And where's my film director there, Tom McLean, yes. Ready when you are, Mr. DeMille. So this is going to end up on YouTube actually. And I want to thank as well, because I don't drive now, you see, for health reasons, as Robin alluded to there. Harry Lennox, yes, Harry's there, yeah. Stuart McCracken, where are you, Stuart? Yes. Wesley Thompson, yes, Wesley's here. Adrian Ross, yes. Derek McAfee, no, not here today. Tom Conway, yes, Tom, yes, thanks very much. Thanks very much for your driving duties, very much appreciated. And I want to thank Christine as well, the good wife. So that's biblical, of course. So if you know your Bible, if you know the book of Proverbs, of course, the value of a good wife is beyond rubies, and she drinks not of the cup of idleness. So no chance of that in our house. And she also answers the telephone. So the story, book number 25. There we go. And just before I get to that, sometimes people send me funny emails, and I like this one here. You can see, keep me and Christian there, an old fella sitting with a letter. And what does the letter say? What are they discussing over breakfast? We've closed your bank account, you've been charged £25 for this letter. And I laughed and I thought, that's about right, isn't it? I used to bank at Danske Bank, that's now closed. The Ulster Bank at King Square are now closed. But they want to charge you money for letters. That's the way that it works. Tom, here, I'm thinking of Tom McLean here, my film director, because he rides a motorbike. I rode a motorbike years ago and ended up in hospital after racing around the country. So enjoy life while you can. It has an expiration date. On that note, Cregagh Updated. And of course, there's the tram at the top of the Cregagh Road. That's where we're headed this morning, actually. So we're going to start at Trammock Square, go up over East Bridge Street and the Albert Bridge, up the Woodstock Road, up the Cregagh Road, and finishing at Hillmount, and that's where the tram is there. Electric trams opened in 1905, used to be horse-drawn. And you can see the tram driver and the conductor there at the top of the Cregagh Road at Hillmount. So that's where we're going. Now, doing a wee bit of research here, townlands. So we're going to go through 2 or 3 townlands. Now we're going to start at Ballymacarrett, that's where Woodstock or Willowfield is. Then we're going to go on up the Cregagh Road, and there are a couple of townlands up there, Ballymacarrett and Cregagh. And what I was able to find out was, of course, you know, Cregagh townland, 200 acres, Ballymacarrett townland, 600 acres. The whole of Ireland is divided up into townlands. 60,000 in the whole of Ireland, 9,000 in Northern Ireland, and about 2,000 in East Belfast. And these are 2 of them here. What I was also able to find out was the landowner. Now, going way back to the 1860s, Griffith's valuation of tenements was one of the early records of who owned the land. So one man owned these 2 townlands. But the story gets even better. He owned most of the neighbouring townlands. You might be familiar with names like Lisnashara. So he owned Lisnashara, Ballymacarrett and Cregagh. He also owned Braniel. He owned Carnamuck, which is in front of Braniel. And then if you go on up the Ballygown Road, Slataddy, he owned Slataddy. And across the Ballygown Road, Castlereagh, one man owned all these townlands. And that was a man called the Marquis of Downshire. So his name appears in the Cregagh Road, Downshire Road, Downshire Hall, and Downshire Park Central. So that was way back in the 1860s. And round about the Knock area, that's not part of the story, but one man owned 4 townlands. So really 2 men owned most of East Belfast a couple of 100 years ago. So that's a start point. So there's Trammock Square. Now, a wee bit of the year's advance, and I'm going to have to sit down now, you see, you want to talk. Oh, that's better. So there's the trolley bus at Trammock Square. You can see there's a right scrum there, going up to Cregagh, getting on the trolley bus. And this is wartime livery, Second World War for a trolley bus. We know that because there's a white luminous stripe in the front of the trolley bus. And during the blackout, you see they had to put luminous paint on things like buses and trams and post boxes and things like that so people could see them. So we're going to head on up across East Bridge Street. Now here's the Blitz in 1941. And the records tell me that what's happening here, so you can see there the arrow, that's the power station on East Bridge Street, approaching the Albert Bridge. On Tuesday the 15th of April 1941, the Germans dropped a parachute mine, one of many, on Belfast. And this one dealt a particularly devastating blow to the city because it hit the telephone lines and all communication was broken with the gun operating control room at Stormont Parliament buildings. There was nothing Belfast could do but wait for the Germans to run into bombs. And that was one of the reasons why Belfast was so badly hit. It is estimated that almost 900 people died, 1,500 were injured, and 40,000 were made homeless. At a public funeral for 150 of the dead, 123 were unnamed. And part of the reason of that, of course, was because people were so badly injured by bombs. They weren't whole people, they were bits of people. So that was the story there. And you can see there the number of workers there trying to repair the telephone lines. And of course, up over the Albert Bridge, this is one of Alfred McAlpin's photographs here, absolutely super. And there are quite a few in the book. But this one shows the old Belfast Corporation electric light station, or the power stations we'd call it. And that was built in 1898, and there was being demolished in 1982. And why this was built was, this was the second power station built in Belfast. The first was a smaller one around Smithfield, but this one was built in anticipation of the electrification of the tramway system. So the tramway system from the 1870s in Belfast had been horse-drawn. But just about every city in Britain and Ireland had been electrified except for Belfast. One reason, Belfast had no power station. This was it. This was built from up until the late 1890s, early 1900s, and then the tramway system could be electrified. This was then closed, went on to standby in 1923, bigger power station built round about the docks for Harland Wolf's needs. So we'll travel on up over East Bridge Street on the Albert Bridge Road, and now we're now approaching the Woodstock Road. And there you can see another trolley bus, that's 1962, headed back toward Belfast. There you can see there, that large building on the right, that would be the site of the Mount Conference Centre, and all those low-rise buildings are now gone on the left-hand side. Greatly improved road network there. But of course, if we go into the Woodstock Road, so there we've got Agnes Beck, confectioner and newsagent. And there you see that now, the red arrows point at the length of Agnes's dress. And when I was doing this reminded me of, you might remember a film called The Time Machine. It was on TV a couple of times. And it was about an H.G. Wells story. And part of the story in the film, of course, the time traveller, he's in his house and he's watching a shop across the road where he's watching the ladies' fashions and the tailor's dummy changing. So here we go. Now, see the way the skirt length is shortened? So the one on the left is early 1900s, before the First World War. The one on the right is probably about the 1930s. And the one on the right, of course, that's a lady called Sarah Maxwell. Now, is Desmond here? Where Desmond? Is this your granny?
My aunt.
Your aunt, yes. Do you ever remember the shop? Do you? No?
I do, yes.
Yeah. And did they live upstairs? That was very
They
common.
lived upstairs and they had a garage at the back.
Lived upstairs, yeah. So before people travelled, they quite often lived over the shop.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, this is roughly where Gowdy's menswear is on the Cregagh Road. All those wee shops are now gone. I can remember these in my childhood, up around the top of the Shankle, Ballymacarrett Road. Lots of small shops. We don't have these now because the world is now ruled by supermarkets, you know, Tesco and Sainsbury's and all that sort of thing. But there are lots of those small shops around years ago. Now, Nettlefield House. Nettlefield House was built in 1849 and it was demolished in 1932. It was home of this man. This is Frederick Henry Lewis, the Mayor of Belfast. And there were very few houses about the area in the mid-1850s. One or two, like Nettlefield House, a rather large house. And the old census, great form of information about houses, from 1901, and this is what it said. Now, Mr. Lewis died in 1871, but the 1901 census said that the head of the household at Nettlefield was 63-year-old Mrs. Mary Lewis, with no profession, but an income from houses and ground rent. So probably they built houses round about the estate. quite a bit of land around Nettlefield. And also in the household at that time were her sister Maud, 3 nieces, 1 nephew, a domestic servant and a housemaid. And all those people lived in the house. The family lived there, the one family from the 1840s, up until about the time of the First World War. Then it became the Bristow, I think it was the Bristow Boys' Home. And then in 1926, the school was officially opened. So they built Nettlefield Primary School, or Public Elementary School, on the site. And the old newspaper clippings tell me that it was a junior school for 800 pupils. Now, is Judith here today? Judith, where are you? Yes. So, do you still work in Nettlefield, Judith?
I do.
Are you writing a book on the history of it?
I am.
Is it the first 90 years you're writing about?
I am.
Well, how's that going?
Oh, it's going well.
So far, so good.
Oh, yes.
So originally 800 pupils. How many pupils today?
425.
My goodness. So what must the school have been like with 800 pupils in it?
Exactly.
Cozy?
Very much. So that would have been 50 to a classroom because there are 16 classrooms.
50 to the classroom? My goodness. They were the days, weren't they? Somebody packed them in back in those days.
Like sardines.
And of course, big school building programme in the 1920s. So after the Government of Ireland Act in 1921, when schools were set up, it was found that the old national school network was sort of falling down. So they were building quite a few public elementary schools. I'm going to talk about all of them in a wee minute. So we can see here, here's opening day. And this was opening day in 1936. We can see there, that man there, that's Reginald Wilshire. He was the architect. So he was Reginald Wilshire, MC, Military Cross. So like a lot of men from his generation, he'd served with the military during the First World War and survived. So there he's there with, the man on the left is Mr. Hall. He was the head of the Education Committee. As Robin was saying, as we'll see later, quite a few of these grandees turned up opening of school. And the lady there receiving the bouquet is Mrs. Duff. Now Mr. Duff was the Minister of Education. And the Duffs lived in a large house on the Knock Road called the Orchard. So if you imagine where Marie Curie is just across the road, there's now a development of 10, 12 houses, large house there called the Orchard, and that's where Duffs lived. The wee girl is Margaret Rutledge, and she's doing a very nice curtsy there, as you can see. So there's Nettlefield. And there's a nice picture there. I came across this picture of Nettlefield Primary School from the 1930s now. Lady at the back there, that's Mita Palmer. And she was the infant teacher. Is Robert Thompson here? Where are you, Robert? Is this your mum?
That's my mum.
That's your mum, yeah. And she was one of the first teachers in Nettlefield apparently, wasn't she?
I'll say was, yeah.
Yeah. And that looks like the headmaster. And we can see as we look round the school teachers. We can see look at that for a great hat. Look at that great hat there. And the other thing that I noticed was, let's see, oops, come back there. That's made up. Now, if you look at 2 or 3 of the ladies, they've got nice wavy hair. Now, at this point, I'm going to bring Christine into the story. Because I don't need Google, you see, I've got Christine. So, Christine, we can see some of the ladies here. Front right, third from the left, and one on the back row. Nice wavy hair. Now, Christine's mother was a hairdresser. Christine's very tuned in the hairstyles. Sorry, I should maybe ask the group. Does anybody know what this hairstyle is called of some of these ladies, particularly on the right there at the front? Right, Christine?
Marcel Wave.
Did somebody, Hazel, did you say Marcel Wave? Did you have a Marcel Wave years ago? Well, Marcel Wave. And you find that in a lot of these old photographs and ladies of the Marcel Wave. Very popular. Very popular. So we'll move on up. Woodstock Road. Now there's Woodstock Unionist Club. course that's gone now. That was built round about the start of the First World War, opened by no less Lord Carson, and was originally a drill hall for the UVF. But in later years, of course, they turned the drill hall into a cinema. And you can see there, in the photograph there, it says Picture House. And this was a cinema called the Willowfield. That was there for many years.
The Winky.
The Willowfield, and of course, George Busby, a man called George Busby, has written a very fine book on the secret listeners of Gilnahirk on the radio station. He lived round about the area, and he remembered as a child going to the Willowfield, and of course it was known round about the area as the Winky. And George told me it was a real flea pit. I remember when they were demolishing the Shankle Road in my childhood, and that seemed to unleash a sort of an epidemic of fleas. And you were scratching all over the place. And I also remember in school, do you remember nits? Do you remember the knitters? You know, looking through your head. Well, thankfully those things seem to be a thing of the past. So Willowfield, the unionist part of the Winky moved up to Daddy Winker's Lane in the 1930s. We'll come to that in a minute. Now, here's another wee shop here. And this shop was owned by this lady. This is Sarah Kennedy. And she worked in the shop with Susan Dollahan, and that's Susan there. The wee shop there, as you can see up there at the top. So it was a fruit and veg shop. Looks like they're putting out Christmas trees there. See at the top there, and it says farm. Now that was home and farm. Now I'm going to ask, is Alana here today? Yes. Is this your granny?
Yes, this is Marina, my maternal grandmother. Yes.
Your maternal grandmother. And is that your sister with you there?
She is, yes.
And do you remember the shop?
Of course, worked in it on a Saturday morning.
So did bread.
I went,
She did bread
and
as
then
well.
she diversified into bakery, and she would have got up at 4:30 in the morning
Oh,
and
right,
put
right.
the big griddles on and bake the soda bread.
I think there's maybe a wee bakery shop on that side today, is there?
There is, still is.
Still a bakery.
White.
Of course, a lot of those shops have now gone. And there's a nice picture there of Sarah behind the counter.
No, that's Susan.
No, that's
Oh,
Susan.
Susan, sorry.
The shop assistant. My grandmother was the baker, so Susan would have been in the shop.
Susan worked in the shop there. And I was just looking at this photograph there, and this reminded me, of course, of my childhood, well, lots of small shops. And if you look closely at the photograph, you can see there are a couple of brands that are still with us. Rivita, yes. Bristol, yeah. If you look at the background there, you can see like HP sauce and things like that, and Robinson's marmalade on the counter. Remember the scales? You remember you used to go to the scales? You might remember this, Hazel. Remember you went down to ask for like a quarter of mint imperials, and they went out and people would buy mint imperials, or rhubarb rock, things like that, you know. So of course those shops are all gone, as I say. This one closed in the 1960s. The Willowfield Parish Church. The Church of Ireland, that was opened in 1872. The Church of Ireland was disestablished in 1870. So I think this is when Gladstone was the Prime Minister, you say. So it was decided then, Church of Ireland no longer is a church, disestablished. But there seems to have been a church building programme round about Belfast. So Willowfield Parish Church opened 1872. St Matthew's Parish Church, that's the Church of Ireland on the Shankle Road, where my father was the rector, that was also opened in 1872. As was Knock Presbyterian Church on the Knock Road, 1872. And of course, the land was given by a local landowner, a man called Mullen. He gave the land for the building of Willowfield Parish Church. And one of the first trustees of the parish church was a man we just saw a minute ago there at Nettlefield, the man that owned Nettlefield, Mr. Lewis. He died, unfortunately, a week before the foundation stones were laid. And there we can see a wee boy there, and his name is Noel Brown. Now, his father, Samuel Brown, owned a shop just round the corner, and there you can see in the background there, you see the spire of Willowfield Church? Still there now. It's not there today, but it was still there in the 1930s. Now, Noel was very keen. He was always up here at these book launches, very keen on local history. But unfortunately, Noel passed away there at the age of 99. Passed away at the age of 99 during the week. Now, is Noel's daughter here today? Julie, are you here?
Yes.
Yes. And do you remember Samuel Brown's shop on the Woodstock Road, Julie? Was that
No.
your time?
No.
That was all gone.
It was all gone. I think it
Yeah.
was the co-op, I think, when
The co-op moved in
took
there,
it
did
over
they?
at some stage. I think I remember going up to see, with Dad, to see where it was, where it had been.
And
As I did a few days, a week ago.
Did Dad often talk about the shop?
Oh yes, he loved the shop. Especially, well, the 3 shops, especially the bakery part of it.
Oh yes, that was round the Black Village, wasn't it? George Baker. Well, I remember one of the stories that Noel told me, and this is the thing about history, about the way that has changed. Way back in the 1930s, of course, pig swill was a big thing. There used to be a pig swill man came round and collected your bucket of scrapings from the kitchen, you say. But of course, because of Samuel Brown's connection to the bakery, you say, and they supplied the Presbyterian hostel down on Hard Street with bread, you say. And then they quite often whenever pig swill was returned from the hostel up to Brown's, then they found the cutlery from the Presbyterian hostel stamped with the Presbyterian church's name on it. And this was in amongst the pig swill. And I thought, I bet you the Presbyterian church is still looking for that. so move on. Now there's Noel's dad, that's Samuel Brown, that's him in the front there. He was president of the Chamber of Trade in 1931. With a number of the other worthies, the business owners around Belfast at that time. Now here's a quiz question for you. Who's this man here? It's Samuel Brown. Anybody recognise him? That's a man called S.D. Bell. That's S.D. Bell. And of course, S.D. Bell's still going strong after all these years. That's S.D. Bell there. Haven't named the rest of them, unfortunately. Now, so Willowfield RUC barracks. Now you can see the parish church here in the distance. No spire on it. And there's the RUC barracks there. That's now apartments. And I note that the Belfast newsletter in 1934 said that the Ministry of Finance at Stormont invites tenders for the execution of an RUC barrack at Willowfield. And preference will be given to firms on the King's National Road. I have to imagine that was some sort of a list that you had to be on to supply the government. So that was back in 1934. So we'll move on up the Woodstock Road. We're still in Ballymacarrett. We haven't arrived at either Cregagh or Ballymacarrett yet. Now there's Willowfield House. Willowfield House. Grand big house. Built a wee bit earlier, 1835. So you can see the old early Victorian style there. You can see the houses have been extended over the years. And the house was the home of this man, William Mullen. Now, a bit like Mr. Lewis that we saw, he was also a mayor of Belfast. So this was a very unpopulated area with big houses, well-to-do residents, and that owned lots of land. And Willowfield House, of course, I think it was burned down in 2003. And of course, there was the Gate Lodge. So all these grand big houses had a gate lodge as well. That was the gate lodge that fronted onto the Woodstock Road. That's now gone, that's now a row of shops. By the early 1900s, I think it was 1906, the Roman Catholic Bishop of the area had acquired a number of acres of land from the man who owned Willowfield House. He was a whisky distiller, a man called Jonathan Vint. And so the bishop acquired, I think it was 8 acres of land from Mr. Vint's estate. That was back in 1906. The idea was to build a Roman Catholic church on the site. But then what happened, of course, world events take over the First World War. so it couldn't have built the First World War. Then in the 1920s, economic depression, hungry 30s, and it wasn't until 1936 that the foundation stones were laid. So there's the bishop there with a crowd around him. They're laying the foundation stones in 1936. And, oh yes, the church was called St. Anthony's, of course, and St. Anthony of Padua, apparently, is the patron saint for the recovery of lost items. That's where the name comes from. And there's the church there, still standing today. Now, on a lighter note, so in behind St. Anthony's, there used to be a man who lived there, and he was quite a famous singer in the day. And he wasn't a member of the Recordites. Now, I'm showing the Recordites here. The Recordites were a sort of a comedy singing act. You might remember the Barham Knights a number of years ago. They used to come on and do funny things, sing songs and tell jokes, things like that. The Recordites were someone similar. That's Sidney Dodsworth and George Carroll. They had a sound engineer, a man called Ronnie Cleghorn. Now, don't get ahead of me now. Don't get ahead of me. Their sound engineer was called Ronnie Cleghorn. Ronnie Cleghorn had a great baritone voice. He was on a talent show down it was at the Grand Opera House for the Royal Hippodrome. And there was a talent scout. He was doing an impression. I think it was something like Opportunity Knocks, Hollywood Doubles. Did an impression of a man called Nat King Cole. And his face was blacked up to do that. That probably wouldn't be allowed today. But he sang anyway. He won the talent show, and in the audience was a talent scout. So we become the talent scouts, me man. A talent scout from a recording company that met Ronnie straight after the show and offered him a recording contract. And he said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Ronnie Cleghorn." He lived in Roslyn Street, just in behind St. Anthony's. The talent scout said, he said, "But we couldn't have a recording star called Cleghorn. Can you think of another name?" And they looked round, and there was Sidney Dodsworth, George. I said, "Carroll." I said, "What about Ronnie Carroll?" He said, "That's it." So Ronnie Carroll was signed up, and then became a recording star, married a lady called Millicent Martin, and sang for Britain in the Eurovision Song Contest and came second. Now, I'm going to ask Christine again here, because she remembers these things. What did Ronnie Carroll sing in the Eurovision Song Contest, darling? He came second. What was the name of the song?
Say wonderful things to me. I think you're wonderful too.
Oh, thank you very much. That was Ronnie sang it. That was very well delivered, actually. So Ronnie sang that in the Eurovision Song Contest in the early 1960s, and he came second. Now there's a map of Ballymacarrett. The first ordnance survey map of Ballymacarrett was done and completed in 1834. Now if you look at it, what you can see is most of it's white, and the white denotes green fields. So you can see there's a few large houses and a few dark areas, and that means where there are gardens and allotments and things like that. Over on the left there, now that's Ormo Park on Ravenhill Road, and you can see at the top left, that's an area called Lagan Village at the bottom of the Ravenhill Road. You can see over there on the right, the Castlereagh Road, and we can see there the Woodstock Road. And we can see there are a couple of big houses, Willowfield House and Jocelyn College. You can see Willowfield House and Jocelyn College, large gardens beside them. So these were owned by very well-to-do people that owned a lot of land. And here's Jocelyn College. And that's a Mr. Cochran there standing at the door. And again, what the Belfast newsletter back in 1859, here's what it explained. A parcel of land in the townland of Ballymacarrett, adjacent to the town of Belfast, So I have to remember way back in 1859, just before that, Ballymacarrett wasn't a part of Belfast, only become a part of Belfast recently. A parcel of land in the town of Ballymacarrett, adjacent to the town of Belfast, was known as Jocelyn Cottage, containing 15 acres and owned by Lord Roden. Now, in research tells me Lord Roden, the Earl of Roden, was an Irish peerage created in 1771 for a man called Robert Jocelyn, the second Viscount Jocelyn. Of course, those names, Jocelyn and Roden, appear in the area. And we've seen Mr. Cochrane there was a dairy man, as he was called. So he had a dairy. And of course, dairies back in the early 1900s there. Milk wasn't delivered in bottles or cartons, it was delivered through churns. So the milkman and his wee horse and trap come out around the area, and then you brought out your jug, and that was how you bought your pint of milk. And there is testimony from the family. Of course, the Cochranes went on to become a menswear company. They were well known in East Belfast for many years. Delivered milk apparently to the Olympic in Belfast when it was sailing on its maiden voyage. Now, Robin Newton talked about Bill Rutledge. There's Bill Rutledge there. That's Bill with his wife Sheila and their two daughters, Daphne and Lucinda. Now, is Daphne here today? No, I'm not here. And so that's Bill Rutledge's shop there. That was at 367 Woodstock Road on the corner of Cologne Street. Now, a wee bit of history. There's a picture of the King and Queen in the window. This is the year of the Festival of Britain. That's what they're advertising there. Bill's got dark glasses because Bill was in the military during the Second World War. Now, he was at D-Day, not in the first wave, but Bill was in that detachment of the military that sort of followed the frontline soldiers and tied up the munitions and things like that. And as the army approached through France after the Normandy beaches, Bill was gathering up some munitions and something exploded. And he ended up in St Dunstan's Hospital for the blind, and they operated. They couldn't save his eyesight, and he was taught then. St Dunstan's always taught ex-service people a skill, and the skill was running a shop. So there's Bill there with his dark glasses. And apparently, the family have told me, a great memory, this was part of what they were taught at St Dunstan's. There was a place for everything in its place. When maybe you came into the shop and asked for something, Bill knew exactly where it was. Put his hand on it. And apparently he was also very good with money. He could distinguish notes and coins and give you your change proper. So there's Bill Rutledge there. Now, you know, I'm reminded very much of Baroness My Blood. Baroness My Blood is this great expression. Education is the passport to life. Education is the passport to life. Of course, Baroness My Blood from the same part of Belfast as me, up the Shackle. Up the Shackle. Now there's another school there. That was Euston Street Public Elementary School. That was opened in 1926, just a few years before Nettlefield. And that's along Garden Street. When it was opened, of course, the newspaper articles tell me it was for 1,000 pupils. And I'm very pleased to say here today, we've got a former principal of Euston Street Primary School here. John Bell, where are you? Show yourself. John, were you there in 1926? No, you weren't. So you there principal in the 1990s, was it?
Yes.
And how many pupils would you have had in those days?
Well, when I came there in 82, I think it was, there was 360.
360? So how many was there when you left?
Well, it went down to about 250.
250.
You know.
So, imagine Euston Street with 1,000 pupils, a bit like Judith was saying there about Nettlefield. Cozy?
Well, it was very interesting insofar as the classrooms were actually quite large.
Okay.
So when you have 40 pupils in it, they were well spread out. Whereas some of the school classrooms were quite small in those days, and 50 children were sitting sort of on top of each other then, you know. So I was lucky enough in there because we had plenty of extra space where those other pupils would have been as well, but it was nice and spaced out and quite comfortable.
Right, very good. Thank you, John. So there we've got a nice picture there of opening day. A bit like Robin was saying, you know, lots of Merrill chains and top hats and things. And who's in the photograph? That's Mr. Duff. So saw Mrs. Duff there at the opening receiving the bouquet at Nettlefield. That's Mr. Duff. I think he was head of the education committee in those days. Who's he with? The man on the left with the bowler hat, that's Viscount Cherryvalley. He was the Minister of Education. And over on the right there, that's the Lord Mayor of Belfast, Sir William Turner. And as you can see, there are a lot of Merrill chains. And as Robin says, there are good turnouts when you look at these old photographs of all the great and the good. When I was doing my research there, and I found this very interesting. I looked up the Euston Street website, and John, you're probably familiar with this. So apparently the website today is in English, but it's also in Slovak, it's in Romanian, it's in Arabic, and it's also in Polish. Did you know all that, John?
Well, I do now. Well, in those days we spoke Belfastese. In those days we spoke Belfastese. Or Cregagh. Well, it was, I mean, by the time I left, there was quite an influx of foreign families coming in. And there was quite a... What surprised me was I was invited back to one of their opening days, and the head boy and girls showed me round.
Yes.
And they were Polish.
Is that right?
But they spoke perfect Belfastese. And they were the third generation that had come through. Parents couldn't speak very much.
Yes,
but then the children could do the interpretation for it. You know. So that has become standard now, because I think the pupil numbers are back up to 300 or so.
Is that right? Now, I saw a hand get up there at the back, Gordon.
Yes, I'm in the school every Monday and Thursday night.
Oh, you did.
I'm in the Ulster Model Railway Club, and we're located in the basement, the two classrooms which are in the basement. So we are. So
you're still there then?
Yes, we're still there.
Because we had those spare rooms. It was a strange setup, just where you can see those three windows. There was a second story in the basement. And for some unknown reason, when I came there, it was the infants were down there.
Yes.
And it was like the black hole of Calcutta.
It still is.
But for the wee ones to go to the toilet, they have to climb up the stairs, leave the building, and go around to the toilets, which were at the back there, and then go back. And that was the first thing we had to change.
Well, John, when you gotta go, you know. Thanks very much.
Men still have to do it
the last thing I want to say about Euston Street is, I noticed at the East Side Awards, the number of categories there. Favourite primary school teacher. One of the nominations was Mrs. Rainey of Euston Street Primary School, and she was a finalist. I wonder how that's worked out for her. Oh yeah. So that's Euston Street. Right. So we're going to move on now to the Cregagh Road. So we're now move from Woodstock Road to Cregagh. Now there's one of those old garages that I remember those? Remember lots of small garages? You see these days, the big garages now, they're like huge, like Tesco not to go now. The big supermarket chains all own the garages, but about way years ago there were lots of small ones. There were like Burma and Esso and Shell and Maxwell occasionally still. So you can see there, that's one of those small garages. You know, 2 or 3 pumps in the forecourt. And there you can see an Austin Princess there, waiting to get filled up. But over beside it here, at 76A, this building is called the Courtney Hall, the Courtney Scout Hall. And that was opened in 1962. And this is the eponymous Mrs. Courtney, that the hall was named after. Now her son, he was a scout commissioner, that's Tom Courtney, Mrs. Courtney. Now there's a lady who goes to Gilnahirk Presbyterian Church, a lady called Grace Murphy. This is Grace Murphy's granny. And she did a bit of fundraising, you see, for the scouts. Of course, back in those days, I wanted to ask Robin about this, he was still here about fundraising. Of course, back in those days, apparently the story with the fundraising for the Scout Hall was, you had to do it yourself. So Mrs. Courtney and her friends, Grace can remember this, her granny collected sixpences in silver jam jars. A tanner. She collected her sixpences, and so did all her friends. And she also crocheted tea cozies. And they had, you know, tea and bun parties and things like that. That's how the fundraising was done on the Courtney Hall, and that's how it was funded and opened. And across the road, Malcolm Strain, who still goes to Gilnahirk Presbyterian Church, that's Malcolm's grandfather. And Strain's Grocery and Hardware Shop opened in the 1930s. And research showed me that Malcolm had entered the Belfast British Empire Week window dressing competition, no less, in 1928, and was awarded 3rd place in the independent store category. Fantastic. And of course there was great great luncheon down at the excuse me. Right, a better lubricated now. Great function for the prize winners down at the Grand Central Hotel. This is one that was in Royal Avenue. And who handed out the prizes? Sir William Turner, the Lord Mayor of Belfast. He was the opening of Euston Street Primary School. He was the man who handed out the prizes. So, of course, Strange Wee Shop is gone as well. Does anybody remember the Red Rooster? Everybody remembers. I remember the Red Rooster. A great place to go for fish and chips. I think it's now an Iceland store, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just over to the left there. Now, the edge of the building on the far left, that's the Courtney Hall. And that's a wee street there called Gibson Park Avenue. Gibson Park Avenue. So why am I telling you that? Well, Gibson Park Avenue used to be called Daddy Winker's Lane. Daddy Winker's Lane. And there's a picture here of Robert Wilson. Now, Daddy Winker was Robert Wilson, but this is his son, the grandchildren. He was also Robert Wilson. And again, what the research shows me that Robert Wilson was a cattle dealer. And Daddy Winker's Lane was a wee lane down to his house called Glenbanna, down in Lisnashara townland. I mean, there was no land to strive in those days. And Daddy Winker was a cattle dealer, and he had 15 acres of land in Lisnashara. He was called Daddy Winker because he owned the farm, and as children came to rate the orchard over the years, and Daddy Winker came out and remonstrated with them. And of course, the kids called him Daddy Winker because apparently he had bushy eyebrows or something along those lines. So the name stuck. So the lane was called Daddy Winker's Lane down at Daddy Winker's house. Now, in the 1920s, Gibson Park was opened as a sports ground. And there we can see that was along Daddy Winker's Lane. And there we can see the great sort of metal grille over the entrance into Gibson Park. And of course, by the 1930s, Daddy Winker's Lane became Gibson Park Avenue. Now I thought to myself, so who was Mr. Gibson? So where did that come from? And why was Daddy Winker's Lane called Gibson Park Avenue? Well, Mr. Gibson was Dr. William Gibson, MD, in other words, the local GP. He was also a Justice of the Peace, Chairman of Willowfield Union, of Willowfield Football and Athletic Club, which also moved up here, a poor law guardian in the days before the National Health Service, Honorary Secretary of the Ulster Unionist Council, Commander of the 3rd East Belfast Regiment of the Ulster Volunteers, and Deputy Speaker of the Northern Ireland Senate. So he was quite a worthy character by all records. So that was Mr. Gibson of Gibson Park Avenue. One of the first sporting events at Gibson Park was a cycle race. So before they played football or rugby or any of those other sports at it, there was a cycle race there, the old newspaper clipping. I think this was a 100-mile cycle race round the sports ground.
And I have to burst out and say, in early '69, I was looking for a job, and there was an ad. My sister sent me the ad because I was living abroad. Inst wanted a geography teacher who could take rugby, and I came home from very far away for an interview at Inst and got the job. And I think I got the job not because there was a geographer, because plenty of those, but there weren't too many who could take the 4th 15 rugby. And I ended up in Gibson Park. That's where I came to. The rules of rugby can't have been as complicated as they are now, because I was able to coach the team and referee the matches in Gibson Park on home days. And I'm quite sure I got the job because Inst were promoting rugby so much that they needed somebody to take the 4th, and not only that, I got extra money for doing so.
Thanks very much. Now this is Eric Woods here. Eric's writing a history about the Cherryvalley works, am I right, Eric?
Yes.
Work in progress.
Just in completion now, yes.
A work in progress, Eric.
You told me to get ready for Christmas, but it's not, it's not going to be ready for this Christmas.
Which Christmas was it?
We haven't, well, it's like the new Central Railway Station. You'll know when it happens.
Or you mean the transport hub?
You'll know when it happens.
We'll not go there. Did I see another hand, Desmond? Was that your hand?
Yes. We used to have motorcycle speedway racing
Yes.
there in the late 40s as well.
I was all mechanised.
That's all around, it used to be around the cycle.
Speedway, was it?
Yeah.
Got that there. So, and of course, the Willowfield Football Club, and of course they were at Ballarat Street down at Lagan Village, and they moved up to Gibson Park in 1926. And you can see there all the silverware. Willowfield Football Club, they were a junior league side, is that right, Alan? Junior league, yeah. So they weren't sort of like Premier League or First Division, yeah. And there we can see they've won the Irish Cup, the Steel and Sons Intermediate Cup, and the Intermediate League Shield. And they beat a team called Larne in the final of the Irish Cup. So a very good side. So they come up to Gibson Park there, as I say, in the 1920s. Now we can see the old clubhouse behind them. Unfortunately, what happened was they closed up in 1930 because during the Hungry 20s, you see economic depression and that sort of thing. A lot of shipyard workers from East Belfast let off, and people didn't have money to play football right now, and so the club closed. I think there's been a number of incarnations of Willowfield Football Club. No, yeah. So unfortunately they closed. Now here's the good news. Another team came. A rugby team, Eric. And this is Malone rugby team. And that was them in 1938. They were winners of the second 15 Junior League title. And of course, this is all very confusing. Malone Rugby Club on the Cregagh Road. It's a bit like sort of Knock Golf Club. And all that. And of course the story was Malone Rugby Club had been formed at Malone Park in 1896, but they moved over to Gibson Park in the 1920s and took the name with them. Now, is Joe Miles here? You?
Yeah.
Yes? You used to play for Malone, didn't you, Joe?
Yeah.
Are you in this photograph here, no?
No, I'm very happy to say I'm not.
Well, I'm glad you're here. You see just behind the old clubhouse. Was the old clubhouse there in your plant days?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, that was probably the one.
It was one of the last organisations had the big communal baths. Which was a distinct health hazard for anybody who used it. Yeah, it was there. Yeah, it was there when I was there. They knocked it. They stopped using it in the late 60s, and they knocked it down in the early 70s. Yeah.
All right. Communal baths.
Communal baths. Yeah.
Men only.
I'll not elaborate on that.
Thanks, Joe. Now, here's an architect's drawing of Willowfield National School number 2, and better known today as Harding Memorial School, because when this was built there was already a Willowfield National School number 1 just opposite Willowfield Parish Church, but it was closed. The rector of Willowfield Parish Church, Callan Harding, died, so they renamed National School number 2 to Harding Memorial School. There's Callan Harding there. He died about the end of the First World War. So we're still at the top of the Cregagh Road. Now, as Desmond alluded to there, so there was Cregagh Nursery. And there used to be lots of small nurseries around about the country. And I think about it now, and of course, Hillmount was founded about 1940. There's Cregagh Nursery, there was Knock Nursery, McGee's up at Ballymacarrett, number 1, of course, McMahon's down at Gilnahirk. And I was up at Tesco with Christine there, and of course looking at the fruit. And they're very interesting actually, the source of the fruit. If you look at some of the fruit, it's like Chile in South America, or Guatemala, or maybe something else comes from South Africa and Zimbabwe, or maybe some other part of the fruit comes from Egypt. And I thought, imagine all that. Imagine getting a wee punnet of strawberries from Chile and South America to East Belfast and not going it. But of course, years ago, we grew a lot of it locally, you say. And in the corner of Cregagh Nursery there was Cregagh Presbyterian Iron Church. That was built in 1902. And why they were called iron churches was because they were made of corrugated iron. They were sort of like prefabs. So whenever a congregation was established, before they did a bit of fundraising for the church, they quite often put up an iron church. Now there's still an iron hall down on Templemore Avenue. They've retained the name, but it's not an iron hall now. And of course, as churches, as congregations were established, as Belfast grew, quite often the iron churches were dismantled and then rebuilt somewhere else. So you follow it through there, you get like Ravenhill Presbyterian Church, or McQuiston Presbyterian Church on the Castlereagh Road. A lot of iron churches about in those days.
Yes, in
Yes. Go on, George.
That iron church there
Yes.
would have been Christian Memorial.
Is that where that one came from?
And Ravenhill.
Yeah.
They moved them around.
So it moved around, did it? Thank you, George. Thank you for giving me right there. Now, but what day in East Belfast? Imagine that. But what day in East Belfast? Look at the umbrellas there. So there's the length of the foundation stones. So it took them sort of like, 26 years to raise about a money to build the church. The good news was the church was about to be constructed. Now the foundation stones were laid in January 1928. Now, when was the church opened? Anybody like to guess? So, I'm thinking about the media these days, how long it takes us to build things. Cregagh Presbyterian Church opened the 28th of September 1928. So in 9 months, from the first spade went into the ground, the church was open. Imagine that. Imagine that. So you see that story years ago. This reminded me about the Belfast County Down Railway. Of course, the headquarters was down at Queen's Quay, and the train used to go up through Bloomfield and Neil's Hill and then up Knock. And the old timetables tell me if you get on the Belfast County Down Railway, the term is Queen's Quay, you were at Knock 10 minutes later. It took 10 minutes to get from Queen's Quay to Knock. How long would it take you the car now? Well, that's progress. That's what they call progress, isn't it? That's what they call progress. So, Ravenhill. Now, the Irish Rugby Football Union, the northern branch this is, had taken a plot of land at 85 Ravenhill Park. Now you have to imagine in those days, no Onslow Gardens from the Cregagh Road. So the way down to Ravenhill Rugby Ground was through Ravenhill Park. This is 85. So they're building the ground. You can see all the workmen there, and you can see no tractors, but a big horse doing all the work. Big horse doing all the work. And then they built the grandstand. That was in 1923, and then the ground was open for business. And that's still the home. It's now Kingspan, of course. That name might change according to newspaper reports. We'll move on up the Cregagh Road. When I blew in to East Belfast about 35 years ago, when I'm driving up the Cregagh Road, and I come to the big roundabout, and of course it's called Bell's Bridge, I'm thinking to myself, why would somebody call a roundabout Bell's Bridge? And of course, here was the reason. There is Bell's Bridge there just in front of the tram. And that was where the Loop River flowed under the Cregagh Road. And of course this was the boundary between Belfast and Castlereagh. So you're now at the city boundary there. There's the tram. Just behind the red arrow, that's the butcher's boy. Do you remember those bicycles with a small front wheel and a big basket in the front? Remember those? See you nod there, Margaret, yeah. I remember those as well. So that had, of course, one car parked on the Cregagh Road. They were the days, weren't they? Now, football teams. Where the Cregagh estate was used to be a large farm called Willowbrook Farm. And there was a football team there formed in the 1940s, and they were called Cregagh Amateurs. In the back row there was a couple of brothers, the Hay brothers, and I spoke to one of them, provided this photograph there going on, and I said, no silverware on display there. No, he says, we never won any cups. And he said, come to think of it, we never won any games either. But the good news was a man called George Best was going to come and change all that. Now, so the Cregagh estate. The Cregagh estate was built over the years 1945 to 1950. It was taking shape there. They built the houses. What they did was they built the houses first of all. Now that's the Cregagh Road, that wee road to the left. To the right, that S shape, that's Mount Marion, just to give you a bearings there. So where the red arrow is, the Cregagh shops. So they weren't built at Greenway. So they built the estate first of all, and then they built the shops after that. And there's a wee street there called Burren Way. It's going to come to Burren Way on the wee side. Now there's 22 Burren Way, and there's a young lady there called Lillian McGann. Now Lillian, are you here today?
Yes.
Quick, show yourself. Oh, there you are. Now, I see you've got a cup there, and it says Best Girl. Now I'm going to ask you two questions. On the top of your hat it says GLB. What was GLB?
That was the Girls' Life Brigade.
Girls' Life Brigade. So that become the Girls' Brigade?
Girls' Brigade.
Okay. So you come there, Best Girl. Now, so what was the criteria for being Best Girl?
It was a number of things, it would be attendance, uniform, turnout, attendance at church, and then different badge work and things like that.
Right. Yeah, I wonder what in these days of equality, would we be allowed to have a competition called Best Girl now? No, probably not now.
We changed it in the Girls' Brigade to Junior Cup and Senior Cup.
Oh, is that right? So what changed? Best Girl. So they told you instead won the Best Girl competition? Well, you know what I'm going to do now? Is Adrian Ross here? Adrian's Lillian's husband. Adrian, how long are you married now?
52 years.
52 years, my goodness. And it was Best Girl, was that a good description? Thanks very much, lad. So that was at 22 Burren Way.
And he was a life boy.
Oh, yes, he wasn't, did you right, Eric? Yes, Richard was a life boy. You're quite right, yeah. Richard was a life boy. Now, at 16, this is a name you probably know here, George Best. George Best just lived a few doors away from you. Well, was it one of George's sisters was about your age, Lillian?
Yes, that would be Barbara.
Barbara, that right, yeah. And was she in the Girls' Life Brigade as well?
She was. We went to 3 Girls' Brigade.
Yeah. George Best, you can see in the background there, they're building a block of flats now. What they're building there is Kilbrony House. That was the last block of flats we built at Cregagh Estate. The newspaper articles tell me that Kilbrony House is now up for demolition. So it's come to the end of its working life now. George Best, of course, this was in 1966. The way back in the early 1960s, their football fields up at the top of Burn Way here. And they used to have talent scouts. And a man called Bob Bishop was watching some footballers, young lads playing football. And he sent Matt Busby a message and he said, "I think I've found you a genius." And that was the way he described it. And of course, George Best went on to play for Manchester United. Now, this whole question about George Best, was he a genius? George Best was once asked in an interview, people have described you as the world's best player. What do you say? He said, well, I would point you in the direction of Pelé, who was the world's best player. He said, I was the world's best player. So there's George Best there playing football. And on up at the top of Burn Way, 2A, George Cherry lived. Where are you, George?
Yep.
Oh, hi, George. There's you there. Cregagh Olympic star player.
Cregagh Olympics captain.
Captain, yes.
Yeah.
Now, this is the McKenna Cup. This is not the one that the Gaelic Association play for.
No, not at all.
Okay. Well, I'm just looking at you here, George. Of course, you lived at 2A, that's up in the corner of Burn Way. And I'm looking at you here, at the photograph. Look at all that hair. You must be the same as me.
I'm the one with the blonde hair. I used to have lovely blonde hair.
Well, we're all lovely in those days, weren't we?
That guy in the arrow was called Charlie Reid.
Oh, is that Charlie Reid?
Yeah.
So I'm not pointing to you at all?
No.
Sorry about that. So, when George Best died, he was only 59. Very sad occasion in 2005. And what lots of fans around the world and supporters did was they brought like bunches of flowers and football shirts and pictures and things like this. And so 16 Burn Way became a sort of a shrine temporarily at the time of George Best's funeral. The tour guide today, 16 Burn Way is now owned by the East Side Partnership and it's now a tourist destination. This man here at the left with the yellow coat on, that's Peter McCabe. Peter McCabe is now the tour guide for George Best's house. And he's with there Michael Parkinson. Michael Parkinson, and that man in the background, that's Mike Parkinson. So he was Michael Parkinson's son. He was also his business manager. Let's see. Yes. When Michael Parkinson visited Burn Way, of course, the visitor book, and Michael Parkinson wrote the visitor book. He said, George Best, a great player, the best. He said, a wonderful true friend. He became a member of our family, the Parkinsons, and I miss him greatly and admired his family. So there you are. Now, the shops. Or as I say in East Belfast, the shops. So there's the shops of Grimton. And this is another one of Alfred McAlpin's photographs. This is from 1984. And of course, as you can see there's a lot of broken windows. And they've since been renovated and that sort of thing. And this is a man here called Billy Hamilton. Now this Billy Hamilton was an uncle of Billy Hamilton, the footballer. And he was a butcher. And I met Billy Hamilton years ago, this butcher here, and he told me that way back in 1952, he said, I visited the Housing Trust headquarters, Housing Trust, the forerunner of the Housing Trust, at Glengall Street in Belfast. And I discovered that these shops at Cregagh were the first shops ever built by the Housing Trust of Belfast, and that the co-op wanted to take the whole unit. But I managed to persuade them for one of the units, a butcher shop, and my rent was £4 and 5 shillings a week. £4 and 5 shillings a week. And he said, which was quite steep at that time. Quite steep at that time. And next door was a man called John Allen, a Castlereagh councillor who owned a newsagent shop. Now, anybody here today from Hillmount News? Show yourselves, yo. So there's all the hard-working staff there at Hillmount News. And I must say, don't tell Robin Mercer, but my books are on sale there. So thanks very much for your support. So there's all the staff there at Hillmount News. Whenever John Allen was selling the shop in the 1980s, Judith Mercer, who's in the photograph here, so she said, John, if you're ever thinking of selling the shop, give me a shout, which he did do, and the rest is history. Now, back to the Cregagh estate. So there's a development there called, as part of it, the Strait. Now, in 1953, there's another one of those competitions. This is for best decorated house. This is the year of the coronation. Now, is Kathleen Hart here today? Not here. So Kathleen's father was a man called Arthur Hart. And Arthur was a machine shop supervisor at a factory on the Castlereagh road called the Goblin. Goblin employed 500 people and made a device called the Teasmate. Remember the Teasmate? Remember the Teasmate? An alarm clock, I don't give them the order a cup of tea. Employed 500 people. Arthur had been in the Home Guard during the Second World War. He was dispatch rider. He kept a motorcycle. This is it here. And what he did was, being a handy sort of a man, he built a sidecar, which was effectively a wooden box. And Arthur and his wife onto the motorcycle, the two children, John and Kathleen, into the box to the side, off the bank, they're going to be for the day. I was going to say, no health and safety in those days. I was going to ask Kathleen, was that story true, but we'll have to assume it is. But of course, these days we're going off to Lanzarote or Jet 2 or something like that. Sad part of the story, of course, the Cregagh Polio Clinic. Now, if you're at Hillmount News there, which I recommend that you visit, just opposite there with the old health clinic, which it looks like it's all boarded up now, it's up for demolition. And way back in 1959, it was a polio clinic. And this is what the Belfast Telegraph said in 1959. It said, the Belfast polio outbreak affected 297 people who contracted the disease in what was the biggest epidemic in Northern Ireland and one of the last, just as the vaccine for polio became available. Now, I was born in 1957. I remember getting a polio vaccine. But it said 297 people. Inaccurate slightly, because polio was really a very nasty virus that affected children. It didn't affect older people, largely children. And I remember at my school in the 1960s when I went to Methody. That's another story. I remember there was a lad in the class with polio and he had a withered leg. And then there was at the Polytech in the 1970s, there was a lad in the class with polio on his face, a withered face. So polio was a very nasty disease indeed. Largely eradicated now. But the polio clinic for you, as the poster says there. Last week part of the story now, there's the Northern Dairies. Originally it had been called Dobson's Dairy, and the address of course was a place called Bell's Lane, which has become Montgomery Road, named after Lord Viscount Montgomery of El Alamein, the 8th Army fame. Dobson's Dairy taken over by Northern Dairies, and then of course they traded as Dale Farm. This was all closed in the year 2000. In the background there, we can see there Cregagh Tech. Cregagh Tech. Now, so again, the old newspaper article said 1962, Cregagh Technical School will come into operation early in September 1962. Had a number of changes in names over the year: Cregagh Technical School, Cregagh Technical College, Castlereagh College of Further Education, and Belfast met Castlereagh. Now, is Muriel Shanky here today?
Yep.
Ah, Muriel, hi. You were the principal at Castlereagh College of Further Education, weren't you?
That's
And would that have been the early 2000s?
Well, I retired in 2007. That's when the merger happened.
Okay.
2007.
And how many pupils would have been at Castlereagh College in those days?
Well, there have been a couple of thousand full-time students and maybe
2,000 full-time?
and maybe 10,000 part-time students. But some people just came and did one class or one lecture class or something.
Yeah. So it's a big operation.
Oh yes, it's a very big
Big operation. And of course, what I read a wee bit about in the paper this year actually was Belfast Met Castlereagh, as it's now called. Belfast Met Castlereagh campus proposed closure prompts public meeting to be held.
Yeah.
So they're talking about closing it and demolishing it.
Yeah.
And that was back in January.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything, Muriel, about what the latest in that is?
Well, it's been stalled just at the minute because the director has left and resigned. So there's a temporary director in place and a temporary deputy director.
Yeah.
So it's just been stalled, but I mean it doesn't augur well because all the admin staff apparently have been moved out of Castlereagh to Springfield Road, which doesn't, doesn't augur well. But we've very, very successful courses in there. Cyber security and so on, and with 350 people doing that. And
have you contacted the PSNI about that? Listen, Muriel, thanks very much. So of course nobody knows what's going to happen with us. So this was in 1957. Built for Castlereagh Rural District Council. They moved over in about 2000 over to Bradford Court at Forest Side there. And it's now the Museum of Orange Heritage, Schomburg House. At one end of the A55 we've got St Finian's, and at the other end, down around Knock, Kings Road, St Columba's. So at one end we've got the teacher, at the other end the pupil. And of course, St Columkills, that's a Gaelicised version of Columba. That's at Ballymacarrett. When I went to Mathley, I had a very mixed relationship with Mathley over many years. And this is part of my school report from the 1960s. George, look at all that hair. Fantastic. So I was in the 1960s. Here's what the school report said. Campbell and I have both failed. But at least I have tried. So here I am after all those years, still trying. And thanks very much for listening.